After a notable social justice activist was exposed via chat logs and forum posts and found to be a self-professed and proud pedophile, something truly strange transpired. Instead of his fellow feminists rejecting and denouncing him and his actions, they rallied around him with unwavering support. Despite the fact that snippets of the chat logs, wherein he referred to his 8-year-old cousin as his little girlfriend, were actually found on his very own website, which in turn corroborated the logs provided by a third party and proved that the man known as Sarah Nyberg claimed to be a pedophile and seemed to have a very unhealthy obsession with his cousin. Facing a plethora of evidence, many had expected Nyberg's defenders to simply deny the allegations, but in a baffling display, some social justice advocates actually started defending pedophilia itself, with a popular musician and poet from London seeming to imply that anyone who has a problem with pedophilia is a Nazi. And apparently, a fellow collectivist named Phil Sandifer took the more analytical approach and seemed to reason that since transsexuals somehow don't have a childhood, it's natural for them to have strange connotations with it, and we should apparently be accepting and understanding if these transsexuals turn out to be pedophiles. And he even went on to claim that it was the Victorians who invented the idea of childhood as a fetish, although I'm not quite sure how that's supposed to justify pedophilia, because I wasn't aware that the Victorians were the most advanced state of humanity that we've ever achieved, but I digress. When pressed on the issue some days later, he doubled down and claimed that he had thought a lot about it, and had come to the conclusion that he's comfortable with Sarah Nyberg being a pedophile, no matter what. It's shocking that someone who claims to be a social justice advocate might be perfectly fine having a proven pedophile among their ranks. And it's even more shocking that an individual like that would have a strong enough political backing to make these statements on a public forum with their full names and careers attached to it. So, knowing that these individuals are making these claims without being criticized or rejected by their progressive activist friends, could there be a possibility that advocacy for pedophilia is actually a hidden tenet of the progressive social justice movement? A tenet which we are only just beginning to see express itself? Well, before we cover this current social justice movement in the West, which has swept the political and college scene by storm in the last few years, let's step back and get some context. Well, if these people are using the progressive brand as basically a front for a pedophilia advocacy group, actually, it would not be the first time. As Germany's Der Spiegel stated in 2010, in an article titled "The Sexual Revolution and Children, How the Left Took Things Too Far," it states, "The left has its own history of abuse, and it's more complicated than it would seem at first glance. When leaders of the student movement in the 1960s are asked about it, they offer hesitant or evasive answers. At the core of the movement of 1968, there was, in fact, a lack of respect for the necessary boundaries between children and adults. The extent to which this endangerment led to abuse cases is unclear." Wolfgang Kroscher, a political scientist and chronicler of the movement, writes in retrospect, "A lack of respect for boundaries is putting it mildly. One could also say that the boundaries were violently torn open." In the paper, The New Republic elaborates on the situation. "It's not every day that a major European political party has to apologize for having supported pedophilia, but 2 weeks ago, the German Green Party had to do just that. For the past year and a half, investigators commissioned by the Green Party have been probing its past associations with pro-pedophilia groups, and the report has been shocking to many Germans. It found that the German pedosexual movement, which advocated the legalization and consensual sex between adults and children, found a surprisingly warm reception in the party in the 1980s. At a news conference on November 12th, one of the current heads of the Green Party, Simone Peter, told reporters she is deeply sorry for her party's past stance and apologized to all the victims of sexual abuse that might feel trivialized. The scandal has prompted widespread debate in the German media, both about the culpability of the Greens and the country's treatment of pedophiles. Over the past several decades, Germany has acquired a well-deserved reputation for open-mindedness when it comes to sex. Now, the Greens revelations have spurred a crisis on the German left and shown that the country's sexual tolerance comes with a historical baggage all its own. The current scandal dates back to last year's federal election, when a German researcher revealed that one of the party's leaders, Jürgen Trittin, had signed off on a 1981 local party platform arguing that sex between adults and children, in some cases, be legal. Trittin quickly acknowledged that he made a mistake, blaming it on an oversight. But conservative political opponents were quick to describe the Greens' action as repulsive. This came on the heels of other revelations which had prompted the report in the first place. That another senior Green Party figure had once written about his flirtations with children while working in a kindergarten. Largely as a result, the party only received a disappointing 8.4% of the popular vote. Although it's little remembered these days, the move to legalize pedophilia in the 1980s went far beyond Germany. In the United States, the Childhood Sensuality Circle and the North American Man-Boy Love Association, known as NAMBLA, advocated with little success for legalized pedophilia, and other countries, including the Netherlands, Canada, and the UK, had similar movements. But the movement fared exceedingly well in the unique political climate of West Germany, where the Nazi past had made the left especially sensitive and, in some cases, susceptible to arguments about individual freedom. It was a widely held belief in West Germany that sexual freedom was a way to prevent authoritarianism, said Stefan Klepsche, one of the researchers who worked on the report. The debate about fascism was very German. Wait. Where do I remember seeing someone claim that if you have a problem with pedophilia, you're a fascist? Oh, that's right. The modern social justice advocate from London, claiming that if you have a problem with pedophilia, you're a Nazi. And in looking at the newspaper The Local's blurb about it, we see yet another similarity between the two progressive movements. It states, in the early days, the Greens sought out to support by catering to minority interest groups as part of a leftist liberalism policy with roots in the 1960s. A leftist progressive group which caters to minority interest groups, which ended up being used to promote pedophilia. It's beginning to seem like what's old might be new again. But now let's focus on what's been happening in the last few years. We've seen psychiatric think tanks claim that pedophilia is not a disease but a sexuality, and immediately, progressive propaganda rags like Gawker started asking the important journalistic questions like, is pedophilia evil or just another sexual orientation? And we saw this in an overtly subversive article titled, Born This Way, Sympathy and Science for Those Who Want to Have Sex with Children. But even the progressive Los Angeles Times had their own pedophilia advocacy moment recently. In 2013, they stated, like many forms of sexual deviance, pedophilia once was thought to stem from psychological influences early in life. Now, many experts view it as a sexual orientation, as immutable as heterosexuality or homosexuality. It is a deep-rooted predisposition, limited almost entirely to men, that becomes clear during puberty and does not change. So it's just last few years that we started to see this torrent of pro-pedo press being unleashed by the left, but when you look back at a 2002 Wall Street Journal article, it seems that the warning signs were there. In an article titled Pedophilia for Progressives, an excerpt reads, "We've long marveled at what it takes to be acclaimed a civil liberties hero these days, especially at universities where politically correct speech codes dictate what may and may not be uttered on campus. The newest hero to enter the pantheon of free speech warriors in our time is the University of Missouri's author of an article intended to undo our culture's delusion that there is something innately wrong with adults engaging in sex with children. As far as the Dr. Merkin is concerned, this is a backward view that may one day go the way of a lot of other uninformed prohibitions. It is Dr. Merkin's view, published in the Journal of Homosexuality, that the panic over pedophilia is much like the way people once viewed female sexuality and homosexuality. Pedophilia, he notes, has been permissible or obligatory in some cultures in certain periods of history. We might point out that the same could be said of human sacrifice. Dr. Merkin says his article was meant to be subversive. That would seem obvious. As for making people think, the professor's views did that all right. particularly in the Missouri legislature. State senators and representatives voted to reduce taxpayer funding to the university by $100,000. As far as the learned elite was concerned, that was the only outrage. The legislature's action provoked far more consternation than did Mr. Merkin's article. The chancellor of the university upheld Dr. Merkin's right to express his views, and the American Association of University Professors did likewise. So, looking back on that article and realizing it's from 2002, it's mildly humorous to think that progressives were considered back then to be free speech warriors. Well, today they are notorious for wanting to ban free speech, and some even go as far as to trying to make offending people illegal. Regardless, we can see that back then pedophilia was beginning to emerge as a new progressive cause in the United States. And apparently, they made a lot of progress over the years, as we could witness in a 2014 WND article titled Pedophilia, the Next Sexual Rights Revolution. It states, last fall, the American Psychological Association caused an uproar when the latest edition of its vaunted diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders called Pedophilia, a Sexual Orientation. After inquiries from news organizations, the APA issued a correction stating sexual orientation is not a term used in the diagnostic criteria for pedophilic disorder. It goes on. As WND reported, a book published in 2005 featured multiple PhD experts claiming that sex with children can benefit boys and even serve a mentoring function. 2 days after WND exclusively reported on the new book, the publishing company announced it was canceling the book in light of the public outcry the story prompted. The book, Same-Sex Desire and Love in Greco-Roman Antiquity and the Classical Tradition of the West, featured scholarly treatises by mostly PhD academics who praised earlier civilizations, particularly Greece and Rome, for the role homosexuality played in their cultures. In a chapter titled Pederasty, an integration of cross-cultural, cross-species, and empirical data, Bruce Rend, PhD, lauded the rampant child molestation that reportedly occurred in those societies, at one point citing evolution as supporting a pro-pedophilia worldview. Wait. A progressive arguing that the ancient cultures like Romans had no problems with pedophilia, so we shouldn't mind it either? Where have I seen that before? Oh yeah, that social justice advocate Phil Sandifer using that exact same argument. So we've seen that progressives defending pedophilia on Twitter are using the exact same arguments to justify pedophilia that have been used by other pedophilia advocates before them. But could it run deeper than that? Could the modern pedo movement have helped bring the modern social justice movement to notoriety? Now, I'm not sure, but when looking at a 1983 article on NAMBLA.org, which is the website of the North American Man-Boy Love Association, we could find that it's tagged under personal experience / social issues and activist strategies, and it's titled A Call for Social Justice. It makes me really start to wonder.